Imagine. You are dropped into the middle of an uncharted, pitch-black wilderness. You are wearing no clothes. You have no phone, no flashlight, no compass, and no shelter. The temperature outside is dropping past -5 degrees Celsius. From the sky, a relentless, freezing rain pours down without mercy. How long do you survive? 10 minutes? Half an hour? Modern science gives us a cold, brutal answer. Within 60 minutes, severe hypothermia will set in. Your nervous system will shut down, your blood will freeze in your veins, and your heart will simply stop. And yet, 50,000 years ago, during the peak of the last ice age, your direct ancestors lived through this exact nightmare. Not for an hour, not for a day, but for 3 relentless months of endless rain. They had no Gore-Tex jackets. They had no heated blankets. They had no waterproof boots. So how did they survive? Today, I am going to tell you the story of a single night in human history. A night so dark, so violent, and so terrifying that it almost wiped our entire species off the face of the earth. A night where the thin line separating human beings from wild beasts was completely erased. The year is 48,000 BCE. The location is the brutal, frozen expanse of prehistoric Eurasia. For 34 consecutive days, the sky has been black. A monsoon of icy rain has transformed the valley into a muddy grave. Rivers have burst their banks, flooding the lowlands and driving every living predator out of their dens. High up on a jagged cliff face, inside a narrow stone cavern, sits the Nehan tribe. They are a small clan of anatomically modern humans. Out of the 30 who began the winter season, only 18 remain. The rest were taken, some by the bitter cold, others by starving cave hyenas. Among them is Zoran, a young hunter whose body is covered in scars from close encounters with woolly rhinos. His skin is wrapped in raw, fat-cured bison hide, but after weeks of rain, the leather is waterlogged, heavy, and freezing against his spine. Beside him sits Samira, the tribe's elder tracker. She is not just a hunter, she is a master of the natural world. She can smell a rainstorm 4 hours before the clouds form. She can read the panicked flight of birds to predict mudslides. The 18 survivors are huddled in a tight circle around the center of the cave. In the middle of that circle lies their most sacred possession, their only lifeline, the living ember. To early humans, fire was not something you made casually with a match or a lighter. Making fire in wet conditions with damp tinder was nearly impossible. Fire was infrastructure. It was a living entity that had to be fed, protected, and carried across hundreds of miles. If that fire died, the tribe died with it. Water conducts heat away from the human body 25 times faster than air. In a cold, damp cave, hypothermia is an invisible killer that stalks every breath you take. The rain outside does not fall in gentle drops. It falls like sheets of heavy iron, pounding against the limestone rocks with a deafening, continuous roar. The atmosphere inside the cave is thick with the smell of wet fur, damp earth, and the lingering fear of 18 human beings who know that nature is trying to erase them. Zoran leans over the hearth, shielding the fading coals with his trembling hands. His knuckles are raw, cracked open by the biting frost. Beside him, small children are curled up against their mothers, shivering violently in their sleep. Their skin has turned a sickly shade of pale gray. "Feed the ember, Zoran," Samira whispers, her voice rasping like dry leaves. "If the coal cools beneath the damp ash, we will not see the dawn." Zoran reaches for a small, precious pile of dried pine bark, wrapped carefully inside an oiled pouch made of deer stomach. This was their last reserve of dry fuel, gathered 3 weeks ago before the storm drowned the entire forest. He places a thin sliver of bark onto the red core of the ember. A faint, fragile wisp of blue smoke rises into the damp air, followed by a tiny, glowing ring of orange light. For a moment, a wave of relief passes through the tribe. The fire is holding, the darkness is kept at bay. But the mountain has other plans. High above the cavern entrance, weeks of unrelenting water have eroded a massive overhang of dirt and loose shale. Without warning, a sharp crack echoes through the stone wall, a sound like a thunderbolt splitting a mammoth's skull. Before anyone can react, a massive torrent of mud, gravel, and freezing water collapses through the ceiling near the mouth of the cave. The sheer force of the cave-in creates a sudden, violent backdraft. A wall of icy water and wet mud surges across the stone floor, flooding the central hearth in less than half a second. A sharp, violent sizzle echoes off the wet cavern walls. A thick cloud of white steam rises into the air, carrying with it the acrid smell of drowned wood and dead ash. And then, absolute, total darkness. The fire is dead. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated panic. In less than 3 seconds, the cave transforms from a warm sanctuary into a pitch-black freezer. The ambient temperature plunges instantly. Zoran's heart hammers against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reaches down blindly into the dark, his fingers scraping frantically against the wet floor, searching for his bone-tipped spear. "Nobody move," Samira whispers, her voice trembling, not just from the cold, but from sheer instinct. "Stay where you are." In total darkness, human senses sharpen to an agonizing degree. You begin to hear things you would normally ignore: the rhythmic drip of water, the chattering of human teeth, the sound of blood pumping in your ears. And then they hear it. From the deep, unexplored back of the cavern, a dark tunnel that leads deeper into the mountain, comes a sound. Heavy breathing. It is a slow, guttural rasp. It is not an animal. Animals do not breathe with that heavy, deliberate rhythm. It is the sound of a lung structured like a human lung. Main problem? All 18 members of the Nihon clan are standing right at the front entrance of the cave. So who, or what, is breathing in the dark behind them? Zoran grips his spear until his knuckles turn white. "Samira," he whispers into the blackness, "did anyone go back there?" "No," she replies, her hand reaching down silently to grip a heavy, sharp flint stone from the mud. "Everyone is accounted for. Keep your eyes on the dark." Slowly, out of the deep shadows of the rear tunnel, 2 faint reddish reflections appear. Eyes. They are set wide apart, buried underneath a massive, protruding ridge of bone. The silhouette that emerges from the shadow is shorter than a modern human, but nearly twice as broad. Its chest is thick like a hollowed log, its shoulders massive, its jaw protruding forward with raw, terrifying power. It is a Neanderthal. For thousands of years, popular culture depicted Neanderthals as brainless, primitive ape men. But modern archaeology tells a vastly different story. Neanderthals had larger brain capacities than modern humans. They were hyper-adapted to the brutal cold of the Ice Age. They possessed incredible physical strength, capable of wrestling a red deer to the ground with their bare hands. And most importantly, they were our bitter rivals for territory, hunting grounds, and shelter. For a moment, time stops inside the cave. Zoran steps forward, raising his spear, his body braced for a fight to the death. The Neanderthal lowers its heavy head, releasing a low, terrifying roar that vibrates straight through the wet stone beneath their feet. Both species stand on the razor's edge of a violent, bloody battle. But as Zoran looks closer into the eyes of this ancient rival, illuminated only by the faint light of the distant rain outside, he notices something unexpected. The Neanderthal is not charging, it is trembling. Its broad chest is heaving violently, its breath rising in thick, white clouds of steam. Its skin has taken on a sick, bluish tint. The storm outside hadn't just driven the modern humans into this cave, it had flooded the lower hunting valleys, drowning the Neanderthals clan, forcing this solitary survivor to crawl into the back of this cavern to escape the freezing deluge. It wasn't there to hunt, it was dying of hypothermia. Outside, the storm reaches its terrifying climax. The temperature drops further as the rain turns into slush. Freezing water begins to pour into the cave entrance like a swelling river. Zoran's younger brother drops to his knees, shivering uncontrollably, unable to speak. The first stage of severe hypothermia has claimed him. His body is losing core heat at an accelerating rate. Within 20 minutes, his heart will begin to flutter, and his breathing will stop. Samira looks at Zoran, then looks at the Neanderthal standing 10 feet away in the shadows. In that split second, a profound evolutionary realization takes place. If they fight now, blood will be spilled. The wounded will freeze to death before the battle even ends. If they do nothing, the cold will kill every single one of them before the sun rises. Violence is a luxury for warm weather. In the brutal cold, survival requires a cold, calculating pragmatism. Samira does something unthinkable. She reaches into her leather pouch and pulls out a precious piece of dried mammoth fat, a dense, calorie-rich treasure that could keep a human alive for days. Slowly, deliberately, she tosses the fat across the mud. It lands right at the feet of the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal looks down at the white block of fat lying in the wet gravel. Then it slowly raises its heavy head, its dark eyes meeting Samira's. It realizes what is happening. The creatures standing before it are not offering a threat. They are offering a bargain. Slowly, carefully, the massive creature reaches into a thick hide pouch tied around its waist with braided animal sinew. It pulls out 2 dark metallic stones. Pyrite. Iron pyrite. Fool's gold. While early modern humans often relied on friction to make fire, using wood drills that fail completely in high humidity, Neanderthals were masters of mineral chemistry. Striking iron pyrite against hard, high-quality flint creates high-temperature sparks that can ignite damp tinder far more effectively than any friction method ever could. The Neanderthal crouches down onto its heavy knees. Zoran lowers his spear, step by step, and kneels in the mud beside it. 2 different human species, rivals by nature, enemies by history, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the pitch-black darkness of a dying world. The Neanderthal strikes the pyrite against the sharp edge of a flint stone. Clink! A brilliant shower of golden, white-hot sparks bursts into the dark, illuminating their wet, hollow faces for a fraction of a second. The sparks land onto a small mound of dried pine moss that Samira holds tightly in her trembling hands. But the air inside the flooded cave is far too damp. The sparks sputter and die instantly in the cold mist. The cold is taking its final toll. Zoran's hands are losing all sensation. His fingers are stiffening into frozen claws, unable to flex or grip. He knows that if they fail in the next 2 minutes, their fine motor skills will be gone forever, and they will never be able to strike the stone again. Together, Samira whispers, her voice barely audible over the roaring storm outside. Zoran, Samira, and the massive Neanderthal form a human shield around the tinder. They press their wet, shivering bodies close together, blocking the freezing draft with their backs, creating a tiny, insulated pocket of dry air using their collective body heat. The Neanderthal raises the pyrite stone once more and strikes with all its remaining physical strength. Clink! Clink! A thick, burning spark lands directly into the center of the moss. A tiny, fragile wisp of blue smoke curls into the air. Samira doesn't hesitate. She leans down, placing her lips inches from the spark, and gently, steadily blows onto the glowing core. Fuh, fuh. The ember feeds on her warm breath. The orange glow spreads across the dry moss, growing brighter and hotter with every second. Whoosh! A bright golden flame erupts into the dark. The light floods the entire stone cavern. The sudden wave of heat hits their frozen skin like a wave of pure, reviving life. The deep shadows recede to the far edges of the rock walls. The tribe lets out a collective, tearful gasp of relief as the young hunters rush forward, piling dry pine bark and resin onto the growing fire. They have won. Against the storm, against the cold, against nature itself, they have cheated death once again. The fire crackles loudly now, sending bright orange sparks dancing up toward the stone ceiling, casting long, dramatic shadows across the ancient cave walls. The 18 members of the Nehan tribe sit tightly together around the blaze, basking in the life-giving warmth. Beside them, resting its massive back against the limestone wall, sits the Neanderthal. It accepts a portion of roasted deer meat handed over by Samira, chewing slowly, its dark eyes watching the flames. For one historic night, the ancient war between two human species was paused by the sheer, unyielding force of the natural world. Scientists today have analyzed modern human DNA, and they discovered something truly mind-blowing. Almost every single person living outside of sub-Saharan Africa today carries between 1% to 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. Where did that ancient genetic connection come from? It came from nights exactly like this. Nights where freezing temperatures, endless rain, and sheer desperation forced two different human species into the very same cave, sharing the very same fire, sleeping side by side just to keep their blood pumping until the morning light. We like to think of our modern world as secure and invincible. We build massive skyscrapers. We install central heating systems. We wear engineered waterproof fabrics. And we check weather forecasts on glass screens in the palm of our hands. But every single piece of technology we use today to keep the rain away is downstream of that one cold, firelit night 50,000 years ago. We are here today not because our ancestors were the fiercest warriors or the strongest hunters, but because when the world tried to freeze them out, they had the intelligence to adapt, the wisdom to cooperate across species, and the stubborn, unyielding refusal to simply lie down and die in the dark. Now, I leave you with a question. If you were trapped in that pitch-black cave, freezing to death in the storm, would you have raised your spear against the stranger in the shadow? Or would you have lowered your weapon and offered your fire? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story gave you a new perspective on what it truly means to be human, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who loves history.